everyone, and welcome to Knittin' and Politickin', a weekly series of conversations on issues we're facing today. Tonight, we're going to talk to two experts in public education, Megan Booth, principal of the Kelly Volunteer Academy in Knox County, and Jeremy Snodderly, vice principal of William Blount High School in Blount County. As you all know, our public education system has been badly affected by COVID-19, and tonight, we're going to discuss the challenges of teaching school both in person and remotely in the time of COVID. But first, what am I working on this week? Well, I'm going to revel in a finished project. I've been working on this one for a while. It's called the Ridgeline Pullover. Nice and stripy, very easy, fast to knit up, nice and warm. I can't wait till winter. I almost wore it tonight, but I have to put the AC on much higher than it is now. But I'm looking forward to wearing it this winter, and I want to see what you are working on. So be sure to post a photo of those projects in the Facebook comments so we can ooh and ah. And be sure to put any questions you may have of the guests in the comments too. And now, I'd like to introduce our guest, Megan Booth, principal of Kelly Volunteer Academy, and Jeremy Snodderly, assistant principal at Blount County High School. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
It's great to be here.
You both are in leadership at your various schools, and tonight we'd like to hear from each of you what kinds of challenges you're facing right now, because we know that you are having one of the biggest challenges I think we're facing in our public school system. And of course, the first thing we always think about is the health and safety of our children, teachers, and support staff. But I'm just curious how your schools are working to make our school environment safe. And Megan, if you could start us off with what's going on at the Academy, that'd be great.
So Kelly Volunteer Academy is working hard to provide a safe face-to-face instruction environment for kids right now. We are requiring masks for all staff and students. Because we're a small school, we are able to provide a little bit more social distancing. We're trying to limit class sizes, all of those things that are within our control, because we know so many things are not within our control. So we don't have any sort of countywide testing for our school system. So we don't have that aspect of it. So all we really can do is focus on following those 5 core actions. We've got lots of hand sanitizer. We're allowing kids to wash their hands as much as they need to, practice that social distancing. We've got signs up that talk about COVID and the symptoms to look for. We are taking temperatures from everybody as they come into the building. So really just trying to make our environment as safe as possible so that learning can happen. We've got to get past that barrier first. And we do have a virtual option in Knox County for kids who the face-to-face is just not feasible for them to do. They don't feel comfortable, or they have health issues that are impeding them from being able to come to school. So there is the virtual option, and we're trying to prepare for both.
Wow, it just seems like so much work. Oh, on top of trying, I know teachers work so hard to get their classrooms ready, and now you've got this on top of it. It just seems like really overwhelming. Jeremy, what are you facing over in Blount County?
Yeah, the safety of our staff and students is always our number one concern. Like Megan said, we can't provide any kind of a learning environment until our students and our staff feel safe. So we spent a lot of time planning this summer. How are we going to implement these things? Our staff's wearing masks, our students are wearing masks, but we tried to think about things like transition times in the hallways, where students were gathering, waiting for buses, and how are we going to allow for space for social distancing when when school ends? How's the cafeteria going to be set up so students have the opportunity to be apart from one another? And and it was just a lot of planning and just trying to figure out those logistics. Who's going to measure temperatures when all of our students arrive in the morning at the same time on the same buses? And so we just did a lot of prep work in the summer and tried to train our staff on that. And then when students arrived, we tried to train our students on, here are the procedures, here are the things that we're going to be doing, and here's how to try to help us stay safe.
Mm-hmm. And Jeremy, you've got high schoolers, and Megan, what are the grades that you're teaching over in the academy?
We're high school as well.
You're high school as well. So how are the high schoolers doing with following directions and because I remember being a high schooler, I just wanted to be like right next to all my friends. The high schoolers are like mercury, you can't separate them. So how's it been for them? How are they responding to the distancing requirements?
Jeremy, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, the kids are doing a really good job, honestly. They understand what's going on. We've obviously encouraged that type of behavior, and they've embraced it. There are always some that you might have to say, hey, remember, we're trying to be safe. You might want to separate here in the hallway, and but it's clear that they're aware of what the risks are, and they're trying their best to follow those rules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tough time for them as well. How do you guys feel like? Do you think that this has become a distraction to learning? Is it surmountable? What's going on in the classroom regarding just the provision of instruction?
So in our classes, right now students have come back, but we started off the first few weeks dividing the alphabet into 3 parts, and so we have a virtual option as well. So we kind of had our students separated into small groups to begin with. So separating in class was pretty easy, and then we brought back we went back to a larger group by going to splitting the alphabet in half. So we've sort of done it step by step, and that's made it a little bit easier for us.
Yeah. Megan, are you doing stuff like that in the high school?
Well, kids start Monday in Knox County, so we haven't even gotten kids yet. So we're planning to spend that first week with kids really focusing on what are those 5 core actions, how can you stay safe, what are our procedures, what's changed, and then at the same time trying to prepare them for virtual learning should we have to shut down suddenly and unknowingly. We want to ensure that our learning can continue.
Yeah. Now, I do want to point out to the listening audience, first, remember to put any comments or questions you have in the chat, but also apparently Governor Lee is talking about education as we speak. So if anybody's got any news that they want to let us know that he said, please do that in the comments as well. It'd be very interesting to hear what kinds of things that they're thinking about on the state level. And also we can shift to what do you guys need from government aside from, guidance at the top? I think, to be very frank, our president has decided that this virus is just going to be left, there's no plan from the federal level really to have a united response. And so that leaves states kind of struggling to figure out, and municipalities trying to do it, and school districts trying to do it, and everybody's doing it a little bit differently. But aside from that big vision, what could government do for you right now that you would really appreciate?
I think for me, and Jeremy may have a different opinion, I think for us, we want to ensure that our teachers don't have the extra burden on top of what they're already facing of trying to stay safe and trying to provide quality education in the middle of a pandemic, but giving a little bit of relief when it comes to state testing, when it comes to teacher evaluations. And that's just my personal opinion, is I feel like that would allow true organic education maybe to occur this year. And I don't know that it's fair to hold kids and teachers to such a rigid standard that was created before we were in the middle of a pandemic. So some relief from some of those guidelines that were set in place before we got here, I think would be helpful. And then just the continued funding to ensure that we have a quality education for every kid, regardless of the zip code. We want to ensure that kids are getting good quality instruction, whether they are in a wealthy neighborhood with high property taxes or a rural community that's going to be hit harder by the pandemic in the coming months and the coming years.
Yeah, I agree that our teachers are pretty concerned about, the testing and just looking at how they're having to do school right now with staggered students, different students every day, and then trying to prepare for virtual learning, plus maybe students in their classrooms. just trying to provide the best instruction they can. And they're very concerned that, they're not teaching to the level that they always do, and it's just a normal situation and they're not as busy. And so I think that would certainly be very helpful. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is, we've gotten a lot of this technology in, and we've tried to train teachers how to use it in a very, very short period of time. And I think just continued training for teachers to be able to use the tools that we have. And then, of course, thinking long term about what happens in 2 years when these Chromebooks need to be, refurbished or replaced. And we've spent time trying to teach people how to use them, and how it's not just teachers, but students and teachers how to use them. And then suddenly, they're obsolete. Can the local governments afford to do that? And is that something the state or federal government needs to step in and help us do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are two really good, interesting things that I'd like to address, specifically the issue of testing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for a lot of people, people think like, oh, well, of course you test. Other countries test, and I don't know why testing is considered such a big deal, but we do have a very different type of school system here in which you're required to go to school until 12th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And Megan, I'd like for you to speak to this because you did so eloquently earlier about how the differences are in our testing compared to other countries, because we look at other countries and we say, well, they do the same thing, but do they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so part of the federal government's role in education is to provide a free and fair quality education for every child. And the key word there would be every child. We have truancy laws in place that require every child who lives in the United States to attend school, kindergarten through the time of their 18th birthday. And ideally, they're graduating around that time. That is not necessarily true in most other countries. In a lot of other countries, they are testing students the same way we are, but they may not be testing every student, and it may not be for the same reason. So they may be testing for ability, and then if you do not qualify to continue on in education, then you may enter the workforce, or you may enter a different sort of trade school. Whereas in the United States, it's wonderful, and I think it's great that we require every child to come to school. But comparing us to other countries who are doing testing just really isn't fair, because it's not apples to apples. You're really comparing two completely different educational systems and two completely different student populations.
Yeah, I did not realize that, that it didn't hit me quite the same way that, we offer and should be proud of our public school system that gives a free and fair education to every child.
Mm-hmm.
That's just really an amazing thing that we need to value and protect. And
Agreed.
I see us not doing that right now. We're really trying to privatize so many parts of government, and I'm on the record saying that I oppose privatization in all its forms. And schooling is definitely an area that we should not be privatizing. And testing, and maybe Jeremy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but testing is also not just does the child advance to the next grade, or is the child learning, but it's also an indictment on the teacher if the child does not. And can you talk a little bit more about what that program of testing, how it treats schools, school districts, and the teachers?
So yeah, not only are we looking at, how much has the child grown over the year, but those scores are of course connected to the teachers and schools, and those are used to determine, whether a school is successful or not successful, or a teacher is successful or not successful. And of course, we want to obviously use the data that we have to monitor how our students are doing, and to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing. But at the same time, right now it's a different kind of year. We're not talking about the same level playing field that we've always had. And so to test that, I'm not sure if we're testing those things, or if we're just testing what does a year of COVID school look like. And that's a useful metric.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because all of the parameters that we've based all the data on from previous years are going to be thrown out, and this year's data is actually going to be worthless for measuring any kind of growth, or measuring teachers' abilities, which I think that testing and then using that as the litmus test for funding is really a bad idea. I think in some ways you can kind of see where the intention was to really penalize, lower performing schools, when actually you should be using that data to say, how can we improve the situation in this school if it is low performing? Does it need, an influx of money? Does it need required training? So I think those kinds of things aren't being answered well with testing. And I'm glad we've had a chance to clarify that, because I think a lot of people don't really think about all the other repercussions of testing. Got a question from the audience. Daniel asks, what's the biggest misconception around our public school system in general? What would you think is a misconception about public schooling?
I feel like sometimes it is portrayed of we just have a bunch of teachers who don't care, which is really surprising to me. But you hear that a lot, and I mean, I've been in education 15 years, and every teacher I've come in contact with cares. And every teacher that I know wants to be good at their job. And you should see right now, you've got teachers in their 60s who are learning to use Microsoft Teams and Canvas and Zoom. And I mean, it's the sweetest moment, but it's also the most gut-wrenching moment, where somebody's been teaching 30 years is having to just completely recreate how they're teaching, but they're doing it. They are spending hours and hours every day because they love kids and they love education, and they want to provide a good education, even with what we're going through in our country right now and in the world right now with COVID. I just, that for me, it breaks my heart when I hear that, is that we just have, in public education, we have a bunch of teachers who don't care.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would sort of add to that a little bit. It's this idea that, teachers teach for a little while here, and then they have the Christmas break and the summer break, and then it's just this job, and that they're not working as much as everyone else. But especially right now with all the technology, they're working almost around the clock. If they're awake, they're returning emails. They're still at home making plans, grading papers during the school year, and so they're only paid for those months that they're there. And so it's not an easy job. It's not a job where people are taking breaks. It's a lot of work, and it's almost nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know that Governor Lee has not approved the raises that they said teachers would get this year. So now they're going to be doing all this extra work, all this extra technology learning for what, and I think they've been delayed for raises for a couple of years. Is that correct? And they're kind of working off of wages from several years ago, and it's hard to find teachers. It's hard to find people to join the profession when they're treated that way.
We are in a teacher shortage right now. That is for sure.
Yeah, I've heard that. So it's interesting now. As you mentioned technology, we've mentioned that a couple of times tonight. That I think it was on election day. We were driving around, and the schools were out handing out Chromebooks in the parking lot, a couple of the polling places, and it's a very different world now with remote learning. And do you see any technology transfer from all the remote learning that's going on now? Do you see a positive effect possibly in the future for using some of this technology?
Oh, I think so, for kids and for adults alike. I mean, we really are creating digital learners and digital teachers in a digital age. And so sometimes we get bogged down in education with the textbooks and the way that we've always done things. And this has definitely been a push for both our teachers and our kids, in a stretch in a good way. And I think they're learning digital citizenship skills that can take them on in life, whether it be college, the workforce, or just productive members of society. I think we really are being able to create kids and that are prepared for it, prepared for a digital world that they're entering.
Yeah, education is not a one size fits all kind of thing. There are lots of students who are going to benefit from being able to be, digital learners even after all this has passed us, and just learning those skills from both the teachers and the students' perspective. It can be an option of a long-term virtual learning type thing that we can do, and And of course, we've talked in the past about, maybe the snow day is gone. Maybe we have the virtual days instead of that. That might not be a very popular thing, but that could be a new change.
Yeah. School children everywhere are going to bemoan COVID-19 because it ruins snow days for them. They have to go home and get on the Chromebook. Poor things. Dawn asks, what can the public do to help teachers and students right now? What can we do for you?
Jeremy, you want to go first?
I would just say, really be patient. Everybody's learning this right now, and there are a lot of tough decisions being made. Almost every decision that's being made right now has a major negative. There's not a good way to handle this. There's no textbook that we can look at to see how do you do this. And so just patience and understanding, and just work with us as much as possible, because we all want to do what's best for our kids.
I would echo that. We really have talked this year about this being the year of grace, and just offering a little bit of grace to each other and to kids, and for hopefully kids to offer it to teachers. And like Jeremy said, there's not a textbook for this, and we've not been through it in our lifetime. So we're all learning as we go, and just being patient with each other and patient with your child's teachers and with their administrators, because no matter what decision gets made, somebody will be unhappy about it. And about half of the population is probably going to be unhappy about it. So everybody is doing the best that they can.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I guess we can't bring cookies to classrooms.
No.
Until we get herd immunity in 2021 or 2022, please do not bring cupcakes to the school for the teachers and kids. I know that there is this perception out there that between the time that you closed last spring and now, kind of nothing happened, because we weren't hearing about it in the media. We weren't hearing that schools were like, oh my God, we've got to train teachers. Can you describe for us, what happened over the summer as principals in your schools? What kinds of things were you doing with your teachers to prepare?
So in Knox County, we rolled out district-wide some training programs for teachers, and Mr. Thomas relayed that it was really a professional expectation moving forward that we complete these trainings, and trying to help get teachers prepared to enter the building and provide instruction virtually and in person in the time of COVID. And then we've just been working as a team within our schools to play out all of the different scenarios. What happens if we go red on the second day of school? What happens if we have a positive case? And just trying to brainstorm through every possible situation so that we can prepare for 1,000 different scenarios and 1,000 different situations.
Yeah, we purchased some new learning platforms and software, and in order to sort of help support our teachers who, again, this is not something they were ever prepared for or trained for, and then tried to figure out how we were going to train them to use that new platform, and then of course just spend that time planning and trying to make it as safe as possible. That was our first concern, and then just how are we going to do school with the new requirements.
Yeah, that just sounds really daunting, because summer seems like a long time, but really to learn these kinds of new technologies. I mean, I know for myself it's hard to learn a new technology after I've been used to, operating business in another platform. So I can only imagine how difficult that must have been for teachers. And of course, now students have to, incorporate learning with this technology, and they're used to being taught face-to-face by a human who's standing in front of them. And now it's going to be a human's image reflected, one-dimensionally on a screen. So universities, we are hearing, are opening for several days and then close them right up like clams, and sending their kids home. And what are I know you guys have prepared for that. What is what are the guidelines for that kind of thing? Is it one student and everything shuts down, or one person that the tests positive? I mean, can you describe for us a little bit about what that procedure might look like?
Jeremy, you want to go first?
We're gonna monitor our students and staff, but my understanding is that decision will be made also with keeping in mind what's going on in the community as well. So what numbers look like in Blount County will have a bearing on that. And I'm not sure that there's an exact number of cases in the school or among students or staff, but it's just more of a big picture kind of thing. And I'm very happy I don't have to make that decision. That's a very tough decision to make, and so I think a lot of factors will play a role if we were to get to that point.
And I would echo that. I think there are some school districts that have a set number of so many active cases in the community would require us to go virtual. I don't believe Blount or Knox County are following that model. I know that Superintendent Thomas is working with the health department in Knox County daily to determine those decisions. My understanding is we are going to try and keep schools open as long as it is safe for those within the school building to do so. But I think they've got a lot of factors. And like Jeremy said, I'm glad it's not me who's making that decision. I'm glad it's somebody above my pay grade for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it is very, very daunting. And I think we're going to have students that are, how is this going to look in subsequent years if there's this constant flux of closing and not closing, or, opening or staying open, or you're shuffling students back and forth from remote. Now we've got students that I think it's safe to say are probably going to be behind the curve a little bit for their grade. And so how are you looking forward to say, okay, how are we going to ameliorate that problem in the coming school years? What kinds of discussions are going on about those situations?
I think that's probably.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
I think that's probably the biggest concerns that our teachers have, because Megan said earlier, they care about what they're doing, and we talk about different learning platforms, but the best case scenario is for our kids to be in person with their teachers, and that's just not possible for some students right now, and it may not be possible in the future depending on how cases go. And so that's going to be a problem. Students are going to be behind, and I think that discussion hasn't happened a whole lot, because right now we're still trying to sort our way through what we've got going on right now. But I know that's going to be, once we've sort of found a normal, that's going to be probably the next step. How are we going to close these gaps that are going to inevitably be created during this time?
And I think where we have landed, at least in the conversations I'm having with teachers and with our school system, is that we don't know that necessarily extending the school year is going to be beneficial. I know there's a lot of models that we've talked about, but it's getting a quality teacher in front of a child and being able to spiral in that learning that they've missed along with new learning and building from there, I think you can catch up. It certainly is not insurmountable at this point. We've got quality teachers who are well trained on learning gaps and how to fill those learning gaps, and know their content really well, especially at the high school level. I feel like we've got content experts. Everybody majors in their own subject area. So a math teacher's got the knowledge base to identify those learning holes and to spiral them into their curriculum for that year. But like Jeremy said, we've got to get off the ground first before we can really get into the nitty gritty of that.
Yeah, I imagine that school looks very different now than pre-COVID. So things like guidance counseling, is that happening? And how are we doing with food distribution, school lunches? How is that all changed up?
So we are still providing every service that we did before. It may look a little bit different, but where children get their meals a lot of times is from the school. So even if they have opted for the virtual option, there is still drive-through meal service for them to be able to pick up meals for a couple of days, because that's really important. If we don't meet those basic needs, we can't teach them anything, whether they're virtual or face-to-face. Social emotional concerns of the impact that COVID has had on especially teenagers and trauma can do to the young brain. I mean, there are a lot of needs for kids right now that require guidance counselors, social workers, all those extras that the public school system can provide. We are still providing them, and I think they're so needed, probably now more than ever.
Yeah, it's the same in Blount County. We're still providing food, whether you're an in-person student or you're a virtual student. all the same services that we had available before. And I'll say our guidance counselors right now are working very hard to make the virtual options work for students, and just working around scheduling problems that are coming up, and just trying to think in a way they've never had to think before. So people think about teachers and they think about students, and they may think about principals, but we've got other staff in the schools that are having to do things they've never done before. That our guidance counselors, our cafeteria workers, our custodians, just everyone is having to really do things and think in ways that they've never been trained to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very different world. I think we have hit our half an hour point, and I want to thank you both for being on the show today. We are indeed going through troubled times, and our public schools are taking a big hit. And I'm hoping that now we can value our public school system and rethink what we need to provide our children to prepare them for the future. And so many things are interconnected. We need to increase wages so families can spend more time and resources on their children. We need to fix the food system so that public schools aren't the only place a child can get a meal. We need to provide daycare options. And if our schools are going to be required to be that, that caretaking role, we need to acknowledge that. We need to fund it, and we need to rethink what a learning day is. We also need to invest in our infrastructure improvements. We need to make sure our environments are healthy. If our children are sick from bad air and water, they can't learn. And so if we want to stay the leader of the free world, then we need to prioritize our children and their lives. And I want to thank you both for being on the show and taking the time. I know you're extremely busy. Jeremy, you're in school. Megan, you're starting. Thank you so much. Please, folks, do remember and give this the year of grace so that we can get through this together and be kind to each other. Thank you so much for tuning in, and join us next week. Take care and be safe.